Welcome to the Elite Power Moves podcast, where we unlock the secrets to level up in all areas of life. I'll be interviewing some of the world's top performers in their fields so that you can uncover and learn the strategies that have led to their overall success and apply it to your own life. Gabrielle, growing up as one of 8 children, you developed your storytelling skills early on. How did your experience shape your approach to leadership and communication in your senior roles at National Australia Bank?
Yeah, look, what I often say, I guess it was that generation too. You grew up and you just shared stories. My dad was a brilliant storyteller. I do often joke that, being one of 8 children, you sort of, the only way you could get anyone's attention was to tell good stories. So I don't know if that actually did have a significant role, but I'd like to think that, my dad being a great storyteller did. But it was, I spent 17 years at National Australia Bank and progressed up from, being a trainee computer operator into senior leadership roles and towards the end, change management roles. So rolling out significant change across National Australia Bank. And it was in those roles the last few years that I actually started to realize that when I shared a story, people seemed to get the message better and seemed to understand why we're doing things better. So this was over 20 years ago. This was about 22, 23 years ago. And that's when I started to think there's something in storytelling. There's something, I started to notice it, and I started to look around. There weren't many people doing storytelling. There'd been the guy called Stephen Denning who had written a book. He was an ex-CEO of the World Bank. And reading that book, I thought there's definitely something in this storytelling business, as in the power of storytelling. So it was about 20 years ago, or almost to the month. So 20 years ago early next year, that I left my corporate career at National Australia Bank and decided that I could be the one that could teach people the power of storytelling in some of my roles. I'd been in leadership roles, so I understand firsthand the challenges of communicating and leading. But some of my role included designing and delivering leadership professional development training. So I knew I had the skills there. So that was 20 years ago, and we're still going strong.
Gabrielle, I find it fascinating too, because in the same sort of context, when I'm, say, getting a group of men together that are busy and stressed and burnt out, and we do things like, we play a touch footy tag on the beach, you get them to turn into their 7-year-old self. And I feel like storytelling reminds you of that kid that you used to be, and it opens up your imagination. And I think that's where the first part of change happens for someone, is when you can really delve into a situation where they were younger. And I feel like with your experience, it sounds like it become part of your identity from your dad to become this sort of person that you are today, making a big impact in the world.
Yeah, look, and what I do, Michael, is when I go into organizations and help the leaders teach them storytelling to communicate better and be better leaders. Look, I come from a very practical perspective. This is going to help you communicate better. It's going to help you communicate your change better, your strategy, your value, or just whatever you are. But the added benefit is when you share stories, and especially when I get them, they'll want to communicate in something like a value like integrity, right? So they want to communicate integrity is important to them. If you take them back to, well, what does that feel like personally, and where did you get that from? 90% of the time, they're talking about their parents or when they grew up, and the messages that they either got from a parent or maybe a coach or a teacher. And it's sort of taking them back to when they were quite young to say, even though this is a company value, or we might call it a leadership value or even a brand, it's fundamentally how they were raised, and it brings them back to that time. So they feel connected to it, the individual feels connected to it, but also when they're communicating it and they're sharing a story about their parents or just growing up on a farm or whatever, that actually creates a much stronger connection to the audience. And there's research shows that when you hear a story, you not only connect to the story, but you connect to the storyteller. So it's actually every time a leader or a salesperson or anyone is sharing a personal story to communicate a business message, they're not only getting their message across better, which is the whole reason we're doing it, but it's actually strengthening the relationship between them and their audience. So when you think of leadership, if you can do that with your team, even just your team, let alone stakeholders or clients, that is that's just a power. Like, to me, why would you not use? Why would you not tap into?
I think I think when you look at like authors like Simon Sinek who talk about what's your why, I think, you know, if you can communicate to your team and link your why with theirs and your customers, then that's an incredible story to have because it doesn't necessarily, you're not necessarily selling your product, you're selling your reason why you're doing it. Like my personal reason and my team and some of my staff members for that have been with me for 8 years know Michael's ultimate goal is to impact 1 million lives and change the health and wellness of their families.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it is definitely. And even if even if you're just a leader working for a company, like to go, why did you actually choose to work for this company for a start? Why do you want to be the best leader? So talking about that in just very simple terms, and through a story, I think could really help. I mean, you've just stated, Michael, that's what you want to do. I would say they're the facts of the situation. But before we started pressing record, you told me why you got into it, and it was a story. And I'm sure you share that story as well. So the story will have much more impact on the audience than when we just talk about the benefits of whatever we're doing.
yeah. Gabrielle, you've worked with incredible organizations like the Obama Foundation, Amazon,
Yeah.
teaching the power of storytelling in business. Can you share some memorable stories working with these organizations that highlights the impact of effective communication?
Yeah, look, there's so many individual examples I could share about when leaders, maybe not right when I've worked with them, but they've, years later have come to me and said, that was the best professional development training I've done. It completely changed the way I led. It made me a better leader. So that's all cool. But I think because you mentioned Barack Obama, I feel like I need to share that story because that is is probably the highlight of my professional career. And so this happened about 6 years ago, and I got an email from the Obama Foundation to say they're looking for someone to train 200 of their leaders on storytelling. And when you get an email like that, you go, hang on a minute, is someone trying to pull my leg? And so I respond cautiously, thinking you'd be getting really sucked in here. But it was genuine, and I went to Malaysia and for a week and trained 200 of their young leaders in storytelling. It happened that Michelle Obama and Barack Obama were going to be speaking at the conference. This was 2019, and we were told we would not meet Barack Obama at all. We saw him speak, and then they said he had to go off. And I was talking to one of the leaders, and they said, "Oh, we've just got to go in and get an official photo of the 200 leaders. Can you hang around?" And I went, "Sure." So I'm sitting there, and then Barack Obama walks past, surrounded by security, and goes in for the official photo. And when he came out, there was me and a few other speakers there. And I actually had taken my 19-year-old daughter with me because it was her birthday that week. And he broke rank, and he came over and thanked us for being the speakers and shook our hand and had a bit of a chat with us. And there's a very big rule that you're told all the time: you cannot ask for a photo. You're not allowed to ask for a photo. And he must know this rule. So he said, let's get a photo with the speakers. So we've got a photo. I shoved my daughter. So there's a photo, and she's literally under his armpit because he's pretty bloody tall. And I'm next to her. So I've got that photo up on my office wall. But it, and I talk about, meeting him was an amazing thing, but this was, when I first started doing storytelling in 2005, no one was talking about storytelling. Like, people were going, storytelling, that's not professional. Why would we use it in business? And this was one of those moments where you go, yeah, this is now it. Like, it's, you sort of not. Don't want to say like you've made it moment, but it was a very special moment to go, yeah, the persistence of hanging in there, trying to convince and educate leaders that storytelling was one of the most powerful skills they could learn. It's come to fruition over that time, and that was sort of almost like the icing on the cake. So Yeah, and my daughter said, "Mum, that was the best day of my life." So pretty happy about that.
It's amazing how the universe works when you put out like the one thing that you do, the one thing that you help the world with that's going to make a big impact, the doors that eventually open for you. I find
Yeah.
it does happen. I like to link it to the story in Think and Grow Rich where the guy bought a mine and was digging for 30 years and kept on digging and just didn't find the gold and decided that he just wanted to give up just before, to spend time with his family. And, he sold the mine and like 1 week later, the guy that bought the mine dug and dug 30 meters later and found the gold. So I think it's a good story for all leaders to remember to stay consistent with what you do and your approach and keep on putting that message out there because something amazing is going to happen one day.
Yeah, and I think also too on that, Michael, it's not only being persistent and keep going, but you said before, like be really clear on what it is you do and what it is you want to do. So when my last few years at NAB, I was involved in some pretty significant change management roles. And when I left to do storytelling, I had so many people say, "Oh, you could do change management." And I was like, "Yeah, I could, but." That first of all, that doesn't really excite me, and I'd be competing with 1,000 other people doing change management. It was like I just want to do this little specific thing, and I knew storytelling was much bigger than change management. It was around communication and leadership. So just stuck to my lane. Okay, this is what I do: storytelling. Yeah, look, yes, I do a few little other things like presentation and thought leadership, but I'm known for storytelling, and yeah, persist because I knew it was important. I knew if I could educate people to say there's such a bias for data and logic in business, and I'm not saying we don't need data and logic in business, but we just communicate and we think, oh, we ignore the emotion, works, personal, just give me the facts. Like no one's ever said, just give me the story. But the story is the most powerful. The story is the most powerful thing people can communicate. So I was pretty passionate of sticking with it.
Awesome. Gabrielle, your book, Magnetic Story, showcases the connection between storytelling and employee engagement. What are some key strategies leaders can implement using storytelling, using the tools to engage their teams effectively?
Yeah, it's Michael, that's my latest book, Magnetic Stories. And I say latest, I have written a few, and I failed English in my final year of school, so like you want a story of who would have thought. Um Storytelling, the most of my books have been around leadership, how individuals can use storytelling. The latest one, Magnetic Stories, did branch out with how to connect with customers and engage employees. But because the reality is, and the reason I sort of moved it from customers as well, is our channels of communication. 10 years ago, you'd have channels to communicate internally and you'd have channels to communicate externally. They're more and more getting blurred. Like, you see a lot of leaders and CEOs put stuff out on LinkedIn. Now that is reaching their customers and their employees at exactly the same time with exactly the same message. So that was the focus of this latest book. And I had so much fun writing it because I interviewed companies and leaders from around the world on how they're using storytelling. I think the key, whether you're an organization or an individual leader, I think the key is to not start with storytelling, but to start with what is the messages I want to communicate. And normally they're around values. Like what do you want to be known for? As a leader or as a company, what is it that you want to be known for? And and yes, it's about your products, like you might be selling products, but you also might be, well, we want to be known as trustworthy. We want to be known as reliable. We want to be known as innovative or sustainable. And when you're talking about those concepts, which are, sort of almost like I would say they're values, you need stories for that. So how do you not only, how as an individual leader do you share a story? Like, let's just say sustainability is important to you, right? You need a personal story to communicate why sustainability is important. Now, again, if I guide people through that, I can guarantee you they'll be talking about when they were kids and, like again, my dad, nothing went to waste. Everything was reused to make something else. So you could use stories like that to say, this has been part of me. This has always been important. Like, yeah, sure, we probably didn't call it sustainability back then, but we called it something else, but it's the same thing. So how you can share individual stories about that, but then of course, if you're talking to, how you share the work related stories as well. So, what are you actually doing that's sustainable? Because you can share all the stories you like about sustainability or innovative or integrity, but you have to do it. You have to live and breathe it, and you actually have to do it. And by doing it, it generates new stories. So people start talking about the things you're doing. So, yeah, look, pretty much I work with organizations to teach their leaders the skill, but then start creating that process of capturing the stories, communicating them, and then creating them by actually doing what you want to be known for.
100%. Gabrielle, with your diverse training experience from the rice paddies of Indonesia to Wall Street, what unique challenges have you faced in fostering resilience among leaders across different cultures and environments?
Yeah, you've done your research, haven't you? It was a pretty cool thing when I ran a storytelling leadership training in Indonesia, and they did the second half in the middle of a rice paddy full field in this pergola type thing. That was pretty cool. And then yeah, when you're running training on Wall Street in New York, you go, yeah, this is pretty cool as well. Again, my focus is on storytelling. And what I find is, first of all, if a leader wants to communicate the message of resilience and persistence, it's how they tap into a personal story to do that. I often get asked about how storytelling goes across cultures because, especially when, we're a lot of companies are global organizations. Storytelling is as human beings, we are hardwired to tell stories. We're hardwired to tell them. We're hardwired to share them. I love the work of Brené Brown, and she talks a lot about storytelling and humans' capacity to connect with stories in no other way. She's actually a scientist, Brené Brown, and one of my favorite quotes from Brené Brown is she says she's come to realize that stories are data with soul. So we still need data like got a soul. Yeah, and so because storytelling is fundamental to humans, it actually does cross cultures. It's one of the things that can actually cross cultures. And when you're sharing a simple story, and I talk about stories about when you're growing up, but they don't have to be. They could be stories about, something that happened on the weekend or stories about your kids. Now, Michael, I know you're recently a new father, and I often say to people that your kids will give you sources of great stories. I don't have kids just because of that, but they'll give you sources of great stories because ultimately you'll be sharing about the things that you're proud that they've done. And when you're talking about your kids in a way that you're proud they've done them, it's reflecting your values. So, and we might not all have kids, but we've all been a kid. So sometimes simple stories about things you've done can cross cultures. Now, you might have to change a few words here and there because the words might not translate, but words don't translate between, in Australia, between Victoria and New South Wales. So it's like that. Yeah, that's just being conscious of your audience and, regardless of whether you're telling a story or not.
Yeah. Gabrielle, you mentioned that you failed English in high school, but went on to become an accomplished author. What lessons about resilience and performance have you learnt from your journey, and what would you like to share to our future leaders?
Yeah, look, I would say the biggest moments in my life when I've been forced with a decision to make have all come through failure. They've literally all come through failure. So, even the fact that I did fail English in, year 12 meant I didn't get the marks I wanted to do to go into the course I did. And one of the subjects I had studied was computer operating. This is showing my age now because this was back in 1984, and it was the first time that subject was ever offered. So it led me to get a job in IT in as a trainee computer operator, and that was at National Australia Bank. And that gave me such a broad range, of skills and experience and leadership development options. And then it was when I was actually applying for a global role at NAB. It was when they were quite global, and we were going through restructures. And I was so sure I was going to get that role, Michael. So sure. And I had so many people telling me that I was an absolute shoo-in, and I didn't. I didn't get the role. And I remember my manager at the time, who was recruiting for the new role, and she told me why, but she sort of said, I'd been at NAB for 17 years. There was a retrenchment package on the table. And she said, what are you going to do? And I go, I think it's time to go. And that was around this whole time that I was thinking storytelling was a skill. And so because I didn't get that job, I left to do storytelling. And that was, like I said, it was 20 years ago almost. I often think back on that. If I had got that job and if I had progressed, I would still be working. Would still be working in a corporate. So I just think when stuff doesn't happen, when failure happens, it won't feel like it at the time. But in my experience, it's been the best decisions. It's forced me to go in another way, and they've always been the best decisions I've when I look back. That's taken me to where I am now, living the life I love, doing the work I love, working with people I really enjoy and respect working with.
Gabrielle, the thing I love about people like you is you live your purpose. Like, you wake up every day doing exactly what the universe wants you to do. I also really believe in the resilience and failure, and the universe is always going to push you in directions where you need to go. Like, my gym business was looking at expanding and going to other locations, and was doing really well financially until the COVID pandemic hit, and we had to have 2 government lockdowns. And I had to figure out how to make $15,000 a month to cover my staff cost and all their outgoing costs that I still had to have without members coming in the door. And in 2 weeks, I created a Peak Performing Teams, which is a corporate wellness business that started to help companies go through the pandemic with their mindset, their health, their sleep hygiene. And I just had to create, and it pushed me to a direction where I get to help more people now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I really, like, I did a lot of research about you, and I think, just like I said, then the universe always puts people in my path where I need to be, and vice versa. So I'm definitely going to keep my ears out, because I coach some guys that have multiple locations, 4,000 staff members, 1,000 staff members. And on my newsletter that I'll send out every month, I like to promote someone,
Yep.
those leaders as well. So I'll definitely do that, because I think
Yeah.
what you do is unique. And I think my little philosophy before I leave is my discipline increases self-worth. When you multiply that by healthy habits, it increases your energy. And when you have an increased energy, it then increases your time output. It also increases your fulfillment in other areas of life. Thank you for tuning in today, and I hope you found the discussion useful. Our goal is to positively impact the well-being of 1 million people's lives just like you, by sharing the experience and knowledge of some of the world's top performers. So you don't miss out on any key strategies to help you succeed, make sure you hit the subscribe button below. And if you think you may know someone that would benefit from this episode, join us in our mission of impacting 1 million lives and share it with your friends.